Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is the Raptor, and like last year, we are going to be making a full lineup for a dream season of Death Battle. However, unlike last year when I specifically made a lineup for Season 8, factoring in what had already been confirmed and what was likely for that season, this time we're going to be starting completely from scratch and making an original, completely hypothetical season of the show. Not predictions for Season 9 or 10 or anything, though you'll probably hear me talk about some fights you've heard me talk about before, so there is that. There are a few things that I should explain though first, since the title might be a bit misleading. This video is not just my dream season like it was last year. I asked my Discord server for suggestions regarding what fights they would most like to see, meaning some of these ideas are mine alone and some are from my community. So this is kind of our collective dream season while still being managed by me. I chose which of my viewer suggestions to use based on a combination of the amount of support each one got and which ones I personally thought worked the best. Needless to say, there are going to be a lot of disagreements among the people who watch this, and that's alright. We're all allowed to want what we want, and there's nothing wrong with that. Additionally, while this isn't going to dominate the lineup, I did include normal death battle trends as a factor, like which kinds of characters they tend to use, what animation styles they use most often, etc, etc. Oh yeah, I will be including an animation style for each fight, along with maybe some other comments. So to my Discord, apologies if your idea didn't get chosen, especially if it was highly upvoted. There's just only so many times I can throw in a specific type of character or fight or animation style. This is going to be a 20 episode season, and I'll be going in the order that I have chosen, from the season premiere to the season finale. So without further ado, let's begin. So for episode 1, we have Alex Mercer versus Cole MacGrath. We all know that this fight has the potential to be the perfect opener for a season, given how it's remained popular for so many years, and personally, I think it's about time that we get another season premiere with two completely new franchises. It would introduce people to a couple awesome video games and start the season off with a bang. There is so much you could do with these guys, from their clashing powers to the sheer intensity of it all. It's just a recipe for success in my mind. I'm putting this one as an either or for the animation, as either in-house or Blender. I would have put it as just Blender since I think that works best for it, but there were a couple other fights suggested for this lineup that were specifically paired with Blender, and I don't know how many Blender fights would be realistic for one season, but as long as you can capture the essence of the fight, it should look like the sickest thing in the world either way. For episode 2, we have Asta versus Meliodas. It might be a little unorthodox to use yet another two series that have never been used on the show before right away, but for me personally, new series and new introductions are what build a lot of my hype. I don't even know everything about these characters, but I do know that they come from really exciting franchises and have a lot going for them as far as character and abilities are concerned, which to me is a perfect combination for a death battle episode. I see this making for an epic 2D sprite fight. We've seen what death battle can do with these kinds of characters, and I think they could take it up to another level with this one. There's just a lot we could get out of it, and I will always be a sucker for learning about new characters. So I say, bring it on. For episode 3, we have Ant-Man versus Atom. It's been a very long time since we've had a death battle season completely devoid of Marvel versus DC in the first 3 episodes, so I felt that this was an appropriate spot to play such a long-awaited superhero battle. This is really the only remaining Marvel vs. DC clone fight that I think needs to happen on the show. All the others either have already happened or I don't think are a necessity. And thankfully this one has the potential to show us stuff that we haven't seen much of before. It's not just a standard superhero punching contest, it has its own gimmicks. This is an easy candidate for a sprite animation. That's what most Marvel vs. DC fights end up being, and it just works well with most of those characters. But even if it does tread similar waters to those other fights in that way, I still have faith that we could get an entertaining episode out of it. For episode 4, we have Ohma versus Lord Drakkon. As a concept, from its theme to the lore of the characters, this episode idea just rocks so hard. After back-to-back-to-back episodes featuring heroes and protagonists and all that crap, it feels right to throw in the first villain fight of the season that also has such a crazy twist. Not to mention that every fight up to and including this one has used characters that come from a different primary medium. The beginning of the season has many different kinds of characters, which is awesome. I definitely put this one one as another sprite fight. If Death Battle wants or needs to make their own sprites, then hey, I think that works just as well. Either way, we get a fight that shows us a new side to Power Rangers, introduces Kamen Rider, and overall is just super compelling. It's really as simple as that. For episode 5, we have Doomsday versus SCP-682. This fight is both loved and hated by all kinds of Death Battle fans, but it got a lot of support in the Discord, so it definitely deserves a spot here. Here we get another new kind of character, not just for this season, but for the whole show. Some say that 682 being from SCP in the first place makes this fight boring, but I'd honestly disagree. This fight gives us a variety that not many people actually talk about, that being the variety of debating, saying what actually matters in a fight and how fights would play out. Sure, it'd be tough to pull off an animation, but I don't think every episode needs to be bombastic and super extravagant. As a test at least, I think this fight is a fine addition. This definitely works as a 3D fight, and putting it as the 5th episode shows how different this season can be from other seasons early on, and I think that's great. For episode 6, we have Liu Kang versus Jago. It would not be a Death Battle season without at least one hardcore fighting game fight, and this is still an awesome choice. There are a lot of fighting game matchups thrown around, and while a good number of them are promising, there are still a whole lot of fights with just face value connections, and a lot of the time that just doesn't cut it for me. Of course, they can still be made into good episodes, like Goro vs. Machamp, but better connections are still more ideal. This one I feel has a really good balance of connections, potential, and character popularity that actually seems worth doing, definitely more so than some others. I'm putting it as a sprite fight for sure, just because I think these kinds of characters have a better track record with 2D animation on the show, and with that, I think we could get a real kick-ass Mortal Kombat vs. Killer Instinct death battle. For episode 7, we have The Knight versus Ori. It has been way too long since we've seen any indie game characters come on the show, and having one episode in a 20-episode season devoted to just that is a great way to spice everything up. These characters do come from video games like the previous fight, but they're from such a different breed of games, and adding in more fights like that where they're similar but different is always a win for me. And as an even bigger way to give these guys time to shine, I'm putting this as the hand-drawn episode of the season. It certainly works well with the styles of the characters, and could get these franchises a lot of attention, or maybe even indie games in general. It could be such an entertaining and standout episode based on their powers, their abilities, their traits, and that's exactly why it's here. For episode 8, we have Gru versus Megamind. This is the one animated movie fight that practically everybody wants to see, and from the characters' stories to their weaponry to the banter potential, it's really no secret why. These two just feel like they were meant to be compared to each other. Just like Doctor Strange and Dr. Fate, or Lara Croft and Nathan Drake, Gru and Megamind are very much the same kind of character from the same kind of medium. It's almost too obvious to not do at some point, and considering how much there is to work with for this fight, it just makes sense. The characters are usually 3D animated, but I'm gonna give this one a sprite battle. It just feels like the safest option for a fluid animation. This fight brings so much hype for the animated movie fans like myself, so it's really a no-brainer for this list. For episode 9, we have Ghost Rider vs. Spawn, a fight with two returning winners from two very different eras of Death Battle. This one has kinda always been around, but it wasn't until a little recently that it really started to gain a lot of popularity, and I gotta say, I like it too. It kinda feels like a high-risk, high-reward matchup, since the animation could be really entertaining if properly choreographed, but really boring if not. But I like to look at things in regards to the best-case scenario, and this has the potential to be so much fun and pull out so many stops. This would be another sprite fight in my mind. It could definitely work with other styles, but I think a really good 2D animation would suit it perfectly and allow the characters to show off everything that they got. But yeah, in general, these guys are just really cool characters with really cool abilities in what would hopefully be an incredibly cool battle. For episode 10, we have Darth Vader versus Obito. The mid-season finale of any season needs to stand out at face value and have the potential to deliver on the hype, and this one has all of that in the bag. In some ways, it could be considered Obi-Wan versus Kakashi 2, but it's also a lot more than that, being able to showcase a ton of new abilities and having a vastly different tone. I could see the argument for putting Vader up against someone more different since he does have a number of possible opponents, but out of the ones that are really popular, this one just works the best in pretty much every regard, and that's what should be most important, honestly. This was suggested as a blender fight, which I think is a perfect choice, especially for a mid-season finale. Overall, I think it works as a fight, and I think it works really well right here in this season. For episode 11, we have Kaneki versus Eren Jaeger. Much like the mid-season finale, the start of the second half really needs to get people's attention. And for fans of Tokyo Ghoul and Attack on Titan, or really just fans of anime in general, you better believe that this one would get people talking. Is this fight the most grand thing Death Battle has ever seen? No, of course not. I mean, it's really no secret that Ken and Eren aren't super strong compared to a lot of the other combatants in this lineup. But as I've always said, variety is good. I think having a relatively more grounded battle, at least as far as power levels are concerned, would be a really nice change of pace and could still be really fun to watch and experience. I'm putting it as just a sprite animation for this season, but it could be a damn good one if the right amount of time was put into it. There is so much you could do with these guys throughout the whole episode. For episode 12, we have Stitch versus Rocket Raccoon. This is not the most popular fight in the world by any means, but you guys already knew that if I was helping to make a dream season, this one would be in it immediately. I think we all have that one personal fight that we want regardless of if anyone else wants it, and this one is that for me. I think it works well as a fight to help kick off the second half of the season, especially after 3 fights with a much more serious tone, and I don't think it'd be too unrealistic to have one more animated movie character in the lineup. Yes, it is another sprite fight for this season. I think hand-drawn could have worked for it, but that slot has already been filled up by a better candidate. Even still, this matchup has so much charm and could be so much fun. I love these characters, they have great connections and arsenals, and I just want to see them murder each other. For episode 13, we have Clementine versus Ellie. Like with the Knight versus Ori, I think it's great when Death Battle includes characters from different kinds of media that they've used before, like different kinds of video games or different kinds of movies or TV shows. And I gotta say that this fight would give us something so fresh and pretty damn unique to look forward to. This matchup to me feels less like a formal fight and more like a last-ditch effort to keep living, a concept that could work very well on the show. Putting the intensity and the psychological side of a battle at the forefront is something I think Death Battle should try more often, and this could pull that off beautifully. I think a 3D battle is the best way to do this fight justice, kind of like Snake versus Fisher. I just think it could give us something new and raw in a really effective way. For episode 14, we have Kira versus Adachi. While maybe not as popular as another JoJo's versus Persona fight that I know, this fight is still a very promising choice and has a specific charm to it that I would love to see come to life. Yes, it has the potential to bring out the toxicity in people, but honestly, you could say that about any fight because we see it happen all the time. And even if some fights are more sensitive to that than others, I don't think Death Battle should stay away from fights just because of the possible fan reactions. They should do the fights that they think really work, and this one definitely works. I'd put it as a sprite animation for obvious reasons, and I think a fun, fast-paced battle coupled with witty writing in the analyses could make for a really solid and exciting episode. For episode 15, we have Mysterio versus Scarecrow. While this isn't really the big Halloween fight that this season has to offer, it does serve as a bit of a pre-Halloween transition episode, much like season 7's Venom versus Krona. And it goes without saying that this fight has loads of creepy potential throughout the entire episode. Yes, it's another Spider-Man character fighting another Batman character, but you would be a fool to say that it's not worth doing because of that. There is so much craziness and over-the-top visualization this fight could pull off, although that's exactly why I put it as a 2D fight, because it might be too big of an undertaking in a more complex style. The point is, this one is different and so friggin' cool. It could definitely take things to the next level with ease. For episode 16, we have Jason Voorhees versus Michael Myers. This episode, of course, serves as the major Halloween fight of this season. The Halloween episode in any season would naturally be either the 4th or 5th last episode, depending on if it would fall on the week of or the week before Halloween, and in this season, it just happened to be episode 16. This also serves as the live action fight of this season for very good reason. The camera angles, lighting, and overall creepy aesthetic that could bring would fit the tone perfectly. Knowing how well Death Battle has pulled off their Halloween fights and live action fights before, even when they can all have vastly different tones, just proves that they could be up for the challenge. This is the true scary, horror-themed fight that we've been waiting for, and the one that we deserve. For episode 17, we have Finn and Jake versus Mordecai and Rigby. Cartoon television matchups and 2-on-2 matchups are not seen that often on the show, but it feels so good when they do show up. And having both of those things in one, especially right after a darker patch of episodes, would be such a breath of fresh air. They may not be the oldest cartoons ever, but this fight has become one of the most popular cartoon matchups in recent memory, and I think it works very well as just that, a fun cartoon matchup. This one definitely could have worked as the hand-drawn fight of the season, but considering what Death Battle tends to do and the amount of craziness they would want to put into this fight, it seems much more likely to be a sprite battle. And yes, there are a ton of other interesting cartoon matchups out there, but you gotta admit, this one's got a lot going for it. For episode 18, we have Hellboy versus Nero. Going back to a much more serious note, we return to the roots of Death Battle, comic books and video games. But even then, this one still spices things up a little. A completely new Dark Horse character facing off against a character from a video game we haven't seen since season 4, not to mention the awesome animation potential and dynamic, is something that I think all of us can appreciate and get enjoyment out of. These guys are just really fun to watch, and it can make for a great episode. A standard 3D fight could work really well for this one. I don't think a good Hellboy model would be too difficult to find, and if they delivered on the episode, it would be a great way of saving one of the best for the end. It's just a really solid pick. For episode 19, we have Brooke versus Lord Raptor. The penultimate episode of a season has an extremely important job. It's not the finale, but it still needs to be entertaining and engaging enough to hold everyone's attention until we get to the end. And this fight is a perfect candidate for that role. Yes, it's silly, and no, maybe these guys don't have the most connections compared to some other matchups. But at the end of the day, this fight exists to be fun and to show us a good time. More importantly, it shows us something different. We've seen anime and video games on the show before, but we haven't seen characters quite like Brooke and Raptor. Obviously, sprites work really well for both One Piece and Darkstalkers. I think that's a pretty safe bet. And with the right animation, this fight has what it takes to be so entertaining. And that's really all I expect from Death Battle anyway. And finally, for episode 20, we have Galactus versus Unicron. Now, you guys can't blame me for putting this fight in yet another video, because this was suggested and highly supported by my Discord, so clearly people still want it. But then again, you can still probably blame me, because I would have put it in here regardless. I just want this fight so fucking bad, man, and of course, it could not be anything but a season finale. This fight was suggested to use Blender for its animation in the Discord, and while I'm not sure that that's the only way it could be done, that would look pretty damn awesome if done correctly. And yeah, I get it, not everybody's into this fight, and if you're one of those people, sorry for talking about it so much, but this is still the most anticipated Death Battle of all time, and still my most wanted. Whether it happens this upcoming season, or next season, or 5 seasons from now, just seeing it come to life would be a dream come true. So guys, that concludes our little dream fan-made season of Death Battle. Again, there were a lot of fights from the Discord that almost made the cut, and of course there are a ton of other fights I really like Captain Kirk versus Han Solo, Hickam and Toothless versus Hero and Baymax, etc, etc. But again, a lot of it came down to making a balanced season with the fights that got a lot of support, and the fights I thought worked best relative to each other. And some just didn't quite make the cut. Either way, I think we made a season that works and has a good variety all around. But I want to hear what you guys have to say. Did you like the lineup? What fights would you want to see in your ideal season? All of that stuff. Let me know down in the comments below, and if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and even subscribe if you could. That would be awesome. But regardless, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, that's it for me. I will see all of you guys in the next video. Peace out.